Hi, I'm Eric Lerner with the Jobs and Equal Rights for All campaign. And this is a contribution to the discussion for the New York, New Jersey Regional Conference on the workers' emergency response to the pandemic. This pandemic comes out of the global attack that has been occurring on workers' standard of living. Of course, the virus is a product of nature, but there was no reason for this virus to become a pandemic except for the destruction of health services that has occurred over the past decades under the austerity imposed by governments around the world. The examples of Taiwan and South Korea, where an effective health service was able to limit the deaths in the hundreds rather than the hundreds of thousands, shows that this virus could have been controlled short of leading to this massive pandemic. Not only did this pandemic come out of the attack on workers' standards of living, but it, especially in the United States, has now intensified the attack. There are layoffs, there are wage cuts, budget cuts, austerity growing, all under the excuse that the general population has to pay for this pandemic. At the very same time, the government is pouring trillions of dollars into the coffers of the corporations and the large banks to bail them out from the consequences of the pandemic. But despite this intensification, in fact, because of this intensification, this pandemic is a huge opportunity for workers to fight back and to regain what they have lost over the decades and go beyond to offensive demands and, in fact, to challenge the very power that has caused these attacks in this pandemic. Over the decades, these attacks have occurred slowly, a slow boil, first against one group of workers, then against another. But now the attack is global and very rapid. So since there is an attack on all, there's the possibility that all can fight back in a way that is effective and which will win. What is needed to fight back? First and above all, we have to have an alternative program, a workers' program, not only to escape from the pandemic, but to prevent anything like this from happening in the future. Linked to that, we need democratic institutions to carry out such a program and to lead the movement for such a program. We need unity in the pursuit of these common demands and behind democratic institutions. And finally, we need total independence from the institutional of the capitalists. In the United States, that means especially independence from the Democratic Party. We have in our hands a means to fight back. Examples from history show that mass strikes, when workers from different industries strike together in a mass movement behind their common demands, such as the general strike in France of '68, they can win tremendous victories and lead to the transformation of society. In today's world, this also means the linking of mass movements with independent electoral efforts to become an arm of those mass movements. So what does that look like concretely? First of all, we need an alternative program linking immediate demands to deal with the crisis to a longer or near-term program to prevent the crisis from recurring. So immediately we need things like paid unlimited sick leave, full maintenance of income for all, massive testing to isolate the virus, contact tracing, a huge immediate expansion of the medical infrastructure. At the same time, in order to enforce such demands activists have to coordinate the strike activity that is already going on, helping to bring workers together to strike together in region, in national days of action that will enforce these demands and force the end to the crisis. But linked to those immediate demands has to be the demands for a broader program. A program that I think most of us are already agreed on. We have to have a massive expansion of public services, of the infrastructure needed to support life. That means free quality health care for all, free education for all through university, free transportation, free housing, free clean energy for all. We have to build up the infrastructure that supports life, not allow the infrastructure to decay to the point where it cannot resist even an infectious disease. This expansion of the public services has to be paid for by taxing the rich and by ending the war machine. In other words, by transferring back the wealth, the trillions of dollars that have been taken from workers over the past decades. In order to fight successfully, we have to have equal rights for all. We have to end the attack on immigrants that is occurring worldwide. We have to end all detentions, all deportations. We have to end the entire incarceration industry. We have to end all restrictions on the right to organize and the right to strike. With equal rights for all, we can win a giant public jobs program which will automatically create jobs for all. We have to end the desperation for jobs that leads people to risk their lives to keep their job. Now, I think there is general agreement that's developed over the past decade around demands like these. But the crisis have made clear we have to go beyond this in a critical way. The gigantic bailout, the second in a dozen years, of the corporations, of the bond market, of the finance market, has made clear that we need to demand socialization of all finance, nationalization, state ownership of finance under democratic control. The federal government, through the Federal Reserve, and the governments of other countries around the world, have in the past weeks poured trillions into the bond market, directly to the banks, into the coffers of the largest corporations in the form of emergency grants, to bail them out for a second time. Now, by any capitalist rule, what happens when a bankrupt firm receives capital from some other entity to buy up its worthless assets? What happens to that worthless entity? Of course, the entity that provides the capital now owns the bankrupt company. The federal government has provided twice the capital to rescue the banks, the insurance companies, the giant corporations that they own. The federal government owns these corporations. We must demand that it exert its ownership, that it declare its ownership, and that it exerts control over these companies by establishing a state monopoly in finance and control over all the corporations that these handful of giant financial corporations already own. We have to put that under democratic control. Now, what does democratic control mean? It doesn't mean control by a handful of federal bureaucrats who could operate in the interests of the capitalists as other state-owned industries in China, in France, and around the world have operated in the interests of the capitalists. No, we have to insist that democratic institutions that are formed from the mass movement be the basis for controlling finance, for controlling the economy, from the level of the factory up to the level of the nation. These democratic institutions, workers' councils, strike committees, have historically been developed on the basis of limited delegated democracy, very different than representative democracy, that ensures that the institutions act in the interest of those who delegate these bodies. If we have a program that we agree on, and democratic institutions to lead the movement and to establish control over the economy as we win victories, then we can have the unity that we need to achieve those victories. Remember, it is only unity that can achieve victory, but it is with unity that we can always achieve victory. As Shelley put it 200 years ago, we are many, they are few. If we unite, we will win. Of course, we have many things that we disagree on, and we can continue to discuss those. But we have to focus on that which we do agree on and to fight for it now. Finally, we need independence from capitalist institutions. In the United States, this means, above all, independence from the Democratic Party. For too long, the two-headed monster, the Republicans, the two parties of the capitalists, have crippled the ability of workers to develop their own programs and their own fights. The spectacle of the collapse of the Sanders campaign in the midst of the coronavirus and his endorsement of Biden shows, if anything can, that the Democratic Party is now and always has been a dead end for workers. It is and always has been a party of the billionaires. We have to establish our own independent electoral efforts linked to the exact same demands that are the demands of the mass movement. An electoral arm for the mass movement. A unified arm that we, with our different organizations, can back in a unified way. To propagandize for that program, to show how it is developing a mass base of support, and to contest for power. And, above all, to indicate to ourselves that we are independent of the Democrats and the deadly strangulation they put on any mass movement. Right now, we still have the opportunity to run candidates at congressional and local levels in 2020. And we can and we should do that. So if we have a program we agree on, if we have democratic organizations, if we can unify behind that program, and if we remain independent of the Democrats and other capitalist institutions, then we can win. We can shake off the death grip that the billionaires have on the world economy that is threatening our very lives, and that we can move beyond this to a no social system. We can move beyond this system so that socialism becomes not just a nice word, not just a dream, but a reality, a society that works in the interests of all who live here. Thanks, and hope to see you at the meeting.